Every kid with a console knows this gun and the P90. Most soldiers won't even get to touch one. The military spent years helping build it, but then walked away completely. This story comes down to three things: how movies ended up saving this gun, but the Pentagon couldn't; how every game had to nerf it because it's too good for fair gameplay; and why this great solution was born at the wrong time. And all of it goes back to one problem that nobody could crack. How do you keep a direct blowback submachine gun shoot dead flat? Gun makers tried everything to tame fast-firing submachine guns. They added weight to slow the bolt down. They bolted on muzzle brakes. They tuned springs. But they always hit the same wall. As long as the recoil energy moved straight back, the muzzle kept climbing. Every fix just nibbled at the edges of the problem. The classic MP5, for example, runs delayed blowback, where the recoil lags just a bit, and you can get ahead of the gun to control it. But nobody seriously thought outside the box until 2007. The same year the iPhone came out, a French-Swiss engineer named Renaud Kebra made a 45 ACP submachine gun run without direct blowback. It started with a company called Transformational Defense Industries. All they cared about was solving this century-old problem of cutting recoil on a submachine gun. His answer became a US patent. And back in 2004, the US government actually put $250,000 into this project, and then a little bit more later. And the goal wasn't clear, like if they absolutely needed something new, but they wanted the recoil technology itself, hoping it could scale up to other classes of weapons. The mechanism drives the bolt downward into a recess behind the magazine instead of sending it straight back. The bolt follows a cam path that splits the recoil impulse. Part of the force still pushes backward like normal, but a big portion gets redirected straight down below the bore axis. They finessed the physics so the energy goes somewhere else. That means the vector stays almost flat on full auto. We're talking roughly 60% less felt recoil and almost 90% less muzzle climb compared to the blowback subguns it competes with. Look at a 5-shot burst. A CZ Scorpion climbs about 8 degrees. A SIG MPX climbs about 6. The KRISS climbs roughly around just 3. And the payoff in real shooting is simple. Your sights stay on the target, and you burn less energy wrestling the muzzle back down. Now, the math gets even better when you look at where the barrel sits. The bore axis on the Vector is roughly about 12 millimeters above the shooter's hand, the lowest of any production firearm. The barrel sits almost in line with your wrist. Stack that on top of the downward energy redirect, and shooting this thing feels genuinely strange the first time. The gun dumps a stack of 45s, and it feels like someone turned the recoil dial to half. Watch this slow motion clip, and you'll see what I mean. Now the bolt does have to come back up after it dives, so the sights bounce a little instead of climbing. The recoil is reduced, not erased, but check the target grouping and you'll see it worked exactly as the patent described. So hand this gun to anyone and they'll say, "Yes, give me that." Which makes the next part of the story a bit strange, because why did the military walk away from it? And before anyone says the military knows best, remember, this is the same system that spent decades doing surgery on the M4 instead of just picking a better rifle. Between 2006 and 2009, KRISS ran a legitimate joint development program with Army RDEC. Prototype hardware went to Aberdeen. The early XS&G builds ran around 1,100 rounds per minute. The results were good, and the big contract looked ready to go down. Then it ended without a contract. The gun didn't fail, the timing did. A perfect product at the wrong time is unfortunately a bad product, because by the time the Vector was ready, the submachine gun category had already lost the argument inside American military procurement. You see this pattern in U.S. weapon development all the time. So it looks like this. A program starts with an idea and a requirement. By the time the idea becomes real hardware, years have passed and the requirement changed in the middle. Imagine building an airport where you set the runway directions on day one, and halfway through construction, the wind shifts for good. Your runways still work fine, they just point the wrong way now. By 2007 and 2008, SOCOM went all in on optimizing a shorter M4. The Marines wanted a hybrid rifle that can also fight like a machine gun, which was the M27. And then the Army was consolidating around M4 improvements around a new ammo type. The pistol caliber submachine gun stopped being a priority because short carbines already covered that job. Sticking with the carbine kept the supply chain clean and the training intact. There was no lane left for the KRISS. The Vector solved a problem the military had stopped asking about. It basically showed up 5 years too late. And that should have killed this gun for good. No military buyer, no story. Except millions of teenagers were about to meet it in a loading screen. But before we get there, KRISS still had one traditional market left to try. Law enforcement was supposed to be the backup plan since the gun feeds from the Glock 21 and 17 mags many officers already carried. Some teams did pick it up, like the U.S. Marshals Service, but it never landed a large agency contract because reliability issues from the civilian market didn't help the pitch. Some of the civilian versions, like the new 9mm version, had extraction problems, especially as the gun got too hot. Later generations came with a replaced bolt, a new extractor, and better guidance on lubrication. After those changes, testing showed about one malfunction in 200 rounds. That's 98 to 99% reliability, like a Glock, when properly set up. But it was still a dead-end business plan. Now let's talk about the look of this gun. For a while, that shape was something that looked cool and went into some movies. It was very eye-catching seeing the Vector in, for example, Resident Evil, where the gun was shown dual-welded, and I guess that could work in real life, but that might be just a fantasy, because most people still had to grab the foregrip to control it a little, as the muzzle does sway downward and to the side. So take a friend who isn't into guns to a movie, and they'll assume this thing is a made-up prop, like in Star Wars. But it is an actual thing. It was such a thing that every major tactical shooter franchise eventually put the Vector in the menu. Games usually feature a gun for one of two reasons. Either professionals actually use it, or it has that cool factor. The Vector got in almost entirely on looks, but it stayed for a different reason, and this is the twist. Video games flipped this gun's biggest real-world problem into a superpower, but it has to be tamed significantly. In real life, 1,200 rounds per minute is arguably too fast for a subgun. You only fire these things in controlled bursts if you get really tactical with it. And KRISS knew that, so they built the answer right into the trigger design. So there is a 2-round burst mode between single and full auto. So it has a total of 3 firing modes. At roughly 1,200 rounds per minute, both bullets are out of the barrel downrange before the gun even starts to move, so they land practically touching each other almost. When the Royal Armories tested every fire mode side by side, the Vector's 2-round burst shot the tightest group, and it was going toe-to-toe with the MP5's legendary 3-round burst. So the 2-round burst might be the single best argument this mechanism ever made. But on full auto, at around 800 rounds per minute, gives the shooter more time to keep the sights on target between shots. At 1200, you dump half a mag before your brain catches up. And missing faster is still missing. But a video game erases every one of those downsides. Reliability isn't a problem in the game. Recoil control is just dragging your thumbstick or mouse down. And when your only job is score hits, that fire rate becomes raw killing speed if you're really good. Funny enough, the fire rate is the one spec almost every game models accurately. And that alone made the Vector a balancing nightmare. Some games won't even let you have those long mags because it will make the server hard to play on, like on the shipment map on Call of Duty. So developers piled artificial recoil onto a gun famous for not having much, just to keep it fair. They nerfed the real gun's numbers to make the virtual one playable. Otherwise, it beats the AK, the M4. Basically, the entire game is unbalanced. Then the pop culture exposure started flowing more curiosity back toward the real thing. Players searched for the actual gun. If you like John Wick type movies, the Vector suddenly had a market to grow. And the internet pretty much kept it alive. So the 3 generations break down pretty simply. Gen 1 was the original. Gen 2 rebuilt the stock hinge to accept an AR-15 style buffer tube, added a new trigger, copied the short throw safety from the AR onto the frame, and introduced the 9mm version. Gen 3 went further into AR-15 compatibility, taking parts like the grip and a pick rail stock. Every single one of those changes aimed at civilian buyers, not soldiers. So the civilian market saved the Vector. It's just a niche gun, and the ergonomics still can't beat the AR-15 for practical reasons. And that's why every kid knows this gun, while most soldiers never touched one. But think about what almost killed it. The gun worked, the testing proved it, and it still lost because the requirement changed while the engineers were busy building the thing. Now here's the part that should bother you. That wasn't a one-time fluke. The Army has spent over 20 years trying to replace the M4, and every single attempt died the same way this one did. Requirements shifted, budgets moved, and perfectly good rifles went back on the shelf like some of the M4 replacement attempts in another video. And that story is worse than this one because the military keeps doing it, and you can check it out right here.